Hallelujah. Welcome to Ask the Theologian. I'm Dr. Randy White. Glad to have you for biblical, theological, and worldview questions, and always a joy to just gather together for a full week of broadcasting and say, what's on your mind, as we will question the assumptions. We will be persnickety today. Let's be 100% biblical. Let's be 100% persnickety. Let's be 100% questioning the assumptions, because we don't want to get into groupthink. We don't want to parrot Polly wants a cracker. We want to go to the Word of God and see what it has to say. And let's throw in a fair degree of sarcasm, just for the fun of it, this week. So let's see, we've got a couple of new things coming up. On Thursday, I've got to find a way to market this, of course, because marketing's everything. We will begin a new series. It's a prophecy series on prophecies of the Messiah. Fulfilled, unfulfilled, hidden. Some of those things we'll begin to look at on our new Thursday series. On Sunday, we'll begin a series on the book of Habakkuk, which is one that I have not gone through. So a verse-by-verse series, Sunday morning, 9:45 for the Bible study hour, replacing the Kingdoms of the Cross. That is completed there, and so that's a couple of new things. We'll be up for all of our broadcasts this week, Monday through Friday. Ask the Theologian. Wednesday night, the Gospel of Mark. Thursday night, the Messianic prophecies is what we'll be looking at, and we'll have a good time there. So we got questions up from Robert and Sarah and Davy and Rhonda and Nicholas. Oh, the Mosquito Man's here. Good to see you. Sylvia, Manny, and Josh. Well, how many of those can we get in today? Probably at least 2, right? We'll go a little faster than that, but try to be thorough. I'm always more interested in thorough than speed. Guess that's why I'm not in the Daytona 500. That's where they're interested in speed. We want thoroughness. Right, Robert? In Holly Springs, Mississippi. For question number 1 of this week, why do people believe ghosts hang around and haunt places? Isn't that precluded by Ecclesiastes 12:7? Well, first of all, there certainly is the common belief in ghosts hanging around and haunting places. You know, let's just look up here, haunted tours. There we go. Haunted tours. Where are we? Let's see if we can find a good haunted tour. I used to give haunted tours, haunted castle tours, haunted blah, blah, blah. Historic Taos Trail. I don't know if we have a haunted thing. I could make one up. Best ghost tours in San Francisco. Yeah, that'd be a good place for, you go in Nancy Pelosi's neighborhood and stuff. California ghost tours. 10 haunted house in Burien, probably Burien, like Van Buren, I don't know. Washington, Jennifer, you know about that one. It just goes, okay, America Ghost Walk. So this is, I just bring that up to say, yeah, there's a sort of a popular lore of haunted places. I suspect just about every place has its lore of that place is haunted, or, you know, the ghost of John, he walks down those streets at night. Whatever it is, it's there. And within Christian circles, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a decent amount of ghostly belief, some of that. Now, a Christian might, let's suppose that there was a haunted tour of Taos. Maybe I should start one, because that'd be fun. I got a couple evenings off, nights in the summertime. We could gather the tourists, do a little haunted tour. And you could make up enough stuff that would have some historical validity, that would kind of be a history tour with a little bit of woo to make it fun. And Christian families would come, they would be entertained by it. A lot of them, I think, would just look at it as entertainment. But there's a lot, both within the Christian world and certainly outside in the New Age world, for example, that really would buy into it. Now, I am convinced, we're going to get to the second part of his question in a moment, which isn't that precluded by Ecclesiastes 12:7. I am convinced that there are no ghosts hanging around haunting places. It just doesn't, it's not a thing. I think we really ought to probably teach our children this, because children can be scared by that kind of thing. I have probably told the story before about, I don't know, in junior high or so, somebody told me that if you look in a mirror in the dark, because there's no light, any reflection you see is actually a ghost. So for a while, I was kind of scared. You know, you go in the bathroom at night in the dark, like I'm going to reach in and turn that switch on. Just because the mind does these things, especially if you got an elementary or a junior high mind, even a high school mind, whatever, does these things to you. And I think it's kind of helpful to know there are no ghosts. There's nothing floating through the bathroom, you know, unless it's a moth, which you might suck into your mouth. That's what you need to be afraid of. Be afraid of the physical, not the metaphysical. That ought to be stronger in Christianity. Now, to the question, does Ecclesiastes 12:7 preclude this, teach against this? I don't know. I'm going to get to there. We're going to go there in a second and look. But Ecclesiastes is one of these books that you have to be a little bit careful with, because sometimes Solomon says stuff that is recorded that is his belief at the moment. It is not doctrine for all time. So you have to rightly divide the book of Ecclesiastes. It'd be a fun one to do someday. We will. It's been years since I taught Ecclesiastes, and I certainly was not a right divider at the time. And then there may be other issues in Ecclesiastes that maybe were true at that time but are not true for our dispensation. Remember, I believe in the dispensation of the silence of God, and I hold to that also, a silence of Satan. So put this together. Does Ecclesiastes 12:7 preclude ghosts hanging around and haunting? Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 7. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. Now, if we can take this as a word of truth, not just Solomon's opinion, it'll be a little bit difficult, because the next verse, vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, all is vanity. It's hopeless. This is one of those occasions in which Solomon is laying up late at night philosophizing and can't come to some good conclusions. So this is part of his philosophy. So I would rather have a more robust argument to say that the Spirit returns to God who gave it, that the Spirit is not here rather than that verse. If I could find some cross references for that, that would help. Let's use, we don't use very often, the little AI tool built into Biblify. Let's go to cross references on Ecclesiastes. Oops, I got the wrong one. We should, you got to click over here, make sure it's Ecclesiastes 12:7. Now we'll do that again. And see what we get when it pops up there for Ecclesiastes 12:7. Here we go. Let's see. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. Out of it you were taken. Dust you are. Okay, there's the physical part. Job has the same issues as Ecclesiastes. We got to figure out who's talking and, is their philosophy right? If he should set his heart to it and gather to himself his spirit and his breath, all flesh would perish together. Probably not directly applicable. Psalm 104, when you hide your face, they are dismayed. When you take away their breath, they die and return to the dust. Now that one, it's pretty close to Ecclesiastes, this take away their breath right there. When you take away their soul, I assume that you is God here. 2 Corinthians 5:8, we have good courage, would rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord. That, again, comes together and speaks a little bit to the believer in this day. But I think what we would have to do is build a complete doctrine of the spirit, the human spirit today. It's an interesting point, Robert, that I don't know if you made this point, but it's an interesting point anyway. I wonder if there has been any books or any studies done on the doctrine of the human spirit. Let's see here. I'm going to do a little research, pull that up, and see if we can find anything, because that would be an interesting, especially from a right dividing point. I'm almost sure from a right dividing point of view, there's not been one done, but maybe there has. Could this particular theology be out there? There would be some work on here's what I'm looking at. The image of God, Imago Dei. Some of these old ones, like Karl Barth, who's sort of a theological philosopher, Martin Luther, and John Calvin, both of whom do have a lot of writings that don't get into their Calvinism. So this ontological, what do we know, perspective, there could be something in there. Theological anthropology in the human spirit, the interplay between the ancient doctrine and contemporary philosophy, includes exploring the divine image. It's not totally going to get into the fall of man, the tripartite view of man. Yeah, none of that is exactly what I'm looking for to say really the afterlife doctrine of the human spirit. Let's I'm making myself some notes. Okay. Let's save that for a possibility of doing some study in the future. A study of the doctrine of the human spirit after death in all dispensations. What happens? I don't know if we need to save that one for like October or something like that. But interesting concept there. Excellent. Let's go to Sarah G. in Indiana. Good to see you. Oh, well, we're coming then, Sarah G. Let's see. Um, a couple of comments. Okay, first of all, Linda. I definitely don't believe in the silence of Satan. I had my own experiences that I can explain. Some of them I could explain, but not all of them. I almost think that we all have a little bit of that. Um, I think here I would like to study this more. This would really take a lot more capability than we totally have here. But let me just show you an example. I think I pulled up the right picture here. Yes, okay. So I was looking at a picture that I took the other day. No, I took this several years ago, actually. The other day I was looking at the picture. And here it is in the Carson National Forest, a beautiful fall day. But then I pushed the little live button, you know, where you can see several frames come together. Now look at this dot right here. You see that, which appears to me to be the sun shining through, something like that. Now watch that dot. When I push the live, here's what happens. It begins floating around. We'll just do that again. Where are you, old live button? Come on. There we go. Now, I said, my goodness, I got a picture of an angel. I've got a picture of a spaceship right there. I don't know. Let's see. I think here we can. Let's move this key photo right. Let's go to right there, and now let's go in on it. Okay. I don't know what you got there. So, but see, there's his angel wings, sort of. It's a bright angel, and the glow that is there roundabout. And again, if you move it to the live, it's floating around there and it lands in the tree. You can, the mind is a crazy thing. You can convince yourself this is an angel or this is spaceships, this is aliens. I don't really know. My guess is it's a piece of dust. That's my guess. It's just sort of floated around in front of the, close up enough to the lens that that's what it is. So I think that we have very real experiences, even real experiences from which you could die, but they're not real, completely in our mind. So, if somebody knew a lot about, what do you call that, psychosomatic or whatever, those kinds of issues, I think that explains a lot of ghosts or the work of the demonic. And that's not, people who have those experiences are not psychotic. People who have those experiences are human. This is the way, the fascinating way in which the mind works. It's amazing. Excellent. Randy says, what if you don't see a reflection at any time? It means you need glasses, Randy. This is what it means. You need glasses, or you need to clean your mirror, one or the other. Sometimes I just, now that I know, I will go into a dark bathroom and look that mirror right in the eye because I know that there's no issue right there. There's lots of discussion going on there. I don't want to get too much into that. Oh yeah. There's a good line. This is why I don't want to get too much into it. John says, "Ghost stuff bores me now. I used to eat that stuff up when I was like 10 years old." Yeah, we do sort of go through this, and some love it, some hate it. But let's get to Sarah G. But before I do, I have to look at some of these. I've got that picture in my favorites file, and I've just got some beautiful pictures there. Look at that one. That was just not far from my house at all. Isn't that beautiful? Here's one taken right in town. It was kind of a fall evening, and just beautiful. There's Shelley and I when the bear was sneaking up behind us. We've got there's some pretty I don't know what that's apricot blossoms, I believe. And yeah, we got the Rio Fernando there going along. Just some pretty stuff. This one is in my neighborhood, and nice. This one's in my neighborhood. Oops, get over here. That's in my neighborhood too. Took the flower, all wildflowers. Just isn't that just beautiful stuff? Look at that one. Carson National Forest. And you thought New Mexico was ugly. Looky there. That's beautiful. Looky there. There is the young Randy White. How about that? This is one of my favorite pictures of Hallie. Isn't that beautiful? It's taken near our house too. Now, I'm supposed to be giving a program, but I just, I caught on and I found some nice stuff. Here's one of, I'm not sure what year this is, but this was some year in Branson that we were there all gathered together, and that might have been COVID year. Look how close we are and all that. I don't really exactly remember. Oh, that's kind of cool. I never noticed that reflection in the light up above. There we are, looking down upon ourselves. Speaking of ghosts. So now to the question, Sarah G. Sorry I strung you along so long. Wondering, Sarah G. says, how do you handle a corporate prayer in which you disagree with the content of the prayer? This happened at a basketball game last night, and I felt discombobulated. Speaking of personal experiences, this is the reason I quit going to National Day of Prayer events. I quit inviting my congregation, say, hey, Thursday, first Thursday in May, we're having national prayer down at the flagpole, down at the plaza, down at the courthouse, down at the wherever. I quit doing them because invariably half the prayers were just stuff that I was like, oh my goodness, I don't even want to bow my head for this one. This is such a misuse of scripture or such a misuse of doctrine, such a misuse, whatever it is. Wow. So I quit doing that. I'm all for a national day of prayer. I say, just pray. That's good. There's nothing wrong with calling the nation together in prayer. Say, hey, our nation needs prayer. Why don't you guys pray? Do it on an individual basis. I've talked about the National Day of Prayer before. I talked about it in my book, Evangelical Garbage. Speak of a garbage organization. It's the National Day of Prayer organization. What a garbage thing it would be, because there is the need for $0 to be spent, and instead there's millions of dollars being spent on the National Day of Prayer. On the local level, on the national level, close that organization down and just say, hey, this is the Thursday we all pray for our country. If your local pastor wants to call together a meeting of you and your congregation to pray, go for it. But you don't have to go gather together with the witch doctor and the lesbian Presbyterian pastrix and all these kind of things. You don't have to get into all that. So skip it, or even just the name it and claim it and all the other kind of things that go. So one, can you skip it? Do I need to go to this? Now, this is a basketball game, and probably I would suspect, I don't know, I would be interested, Sarah G. I'm not sure if Sarah's on this morning, but is this like a private school event, or I don't know. Do they? I don't go to high school games anymore. They used to pray at football games. I don't remember them praying at basketball games because basketball doesn't need as much prayer, I guess. But used to always pray at football games. And then I want to say back in the 90s, the Supreme Court said, no, you can't pray that. There was a big hubbub, that big thing. And now some places do it and some places don't. So if it's something, my first advice is skip it if you can. Let's say, however, you're in a basketball game. There's part of me that wants to say, don't bow your head and close your eyes. Just look around, let the prayer go. There's part of me that wants to say that. But the bigger part of me wants to say, our society does need the reverence of coming to the Lord. And probably you're a better witness bowing your head, closing your eyes, and saying your own prayer and trying to filter all that out. And then saying amen at the end. To promote that tradition, if nothing else, I know some of my right division friends and some of my fundamentalist friends would not like that answer because some people are on this issue more black and white in their thinking, and that prayer is wrong and therefore I cannot participate, which I understand and I'm okay with. And I understand that going through the motions of a prayer is the Pharisees spoke against that. Put all that in the hopper, along with the need for a society that has some traditions, some Judeo-Christian traditions, some strength in spiritual traditions. I think we need that. And so if I'm at a political event and there's a prayer, which, there often is. I know in our local Republican Party, when the Republican Party meets and has their local meetings, they always have a prayer. And I know that I have been asked by certain politicians to, at certain times during some of their rallies, to go and, hey, would you lead us in the prayer? Yeah, I'll go lead in the prayer. I remember, I believe my dad at one point was invited to give the prayer for the opening of the new sewage plant. There's these civic events and public events. I've been invited, to the school board meetings, to the county commissioners meetings, all those kind of things. Hey, we have a prayer. Would you come and say the prayer? Yeah, I'll come and say the prayer. Because I do think there's a good testimony or tradition. Some of those prayers are good. Some of those prayers are terrible. And I do have some friends who would say, better that we have no prayer at all than that sometime there's a bad prayer. I am not really one of those. I say it's better to have prayer, recognizing we live in somewhat of a secular society, and some of those prayers are going to be wretched and horrible. But let's try to remember that we once had a fairly homogeneous spiritual society. So then you get some other issues. What if it's in your church, and in the corporate prayer time, the church, the pastor says, okay, we're all going to gather together and we're going to agree with the Lord, agree together in the Lord on such and such. And you're like, I can't do that. Doctrinally, I can't do that, or emotionally, I can't do that, or whatever it is, I can't do that. I think probably the nice thing to do is to have to go to the bathroom. Excuse me, I'll be right back. Don't make a scene. go ahead and move. But if they ask for any comments, anyone have anything to say, I would say, I am not comfortable joining you all together in that prayer, and so I'm going to dismiss myself. Wouldn't be ugly about it, but now again, I wouldn't interrupt the meeting, but if they gave an offer, then I would do it. So I guess you weave that around, and obviously there's going to be so many different situations, and these things come up just like this. You don't have time to think about it. So I am thinking, if I had my family, my grandkids with me or something like this, and we were at one, afterwards, probably I would say, and this is probably especially true, say, with Jackson, who's a little bit older, I probably, in a basketball game, I would lean over to him right after and say, boy, do they have their theology messed up in that prayer, don't they? And maybe we could have a little conversation. Or if nothing else, he's going to remember Pop saying, boy, do they have their theology messed up in that prayer. And try to bring that up afterwards with my family. I know Sarah G has some, teenage kids. And so to say, hey, we were respectful, but let's talk about that prayer at the basketball game. Afterwards when you go out and get pizza or whatever. Do people do that anymore? I don't know. Thanks, Sarah G. Interesting question. Another interesting question comes from Davy in Northern Ireland. And that question came in last week. I hadn't gotten to it, Davy, but here I am today. And the question is, who was the second in the body of Christ? What an interesting kind of question. I should ring the bell on that. I have not had that question before. From 1 Timothy chapter 1, verses 15 and 16, I think we can see who is the first. This is a faithful saying worthy of all acceptation, that Christ Jesus came to save sinners, of whom I am protos, chief, right at the beginning. Howbeit for this cause I obtain mercy, that in me protos, first, same word there, Jesus Christ might show forth all long-suffering for a pattern, a prototype of them which should hereafter believe on him to life eternal. Hereafter. So after Paul, they're all in that same pattern. So then the question is, who's second? Here's the challenge in answering that, twofold challenge. The simplest is the Bible doesn't tell us. The biggest challenge is that we are not exactly even sure when this took place. We can kind of use the book of Galatians and the book of Acts together and put that together and get there's 3 years and then there's 14 years and put all that together to come up to a particular estimate on when Paul received the mystery. Put that into Acts chapter 13, for example, and the changing from Saul to Paul. But then if we narrow that down to this little field, I'm not sure that there is enough information. But this would be an interesting deal to do, to say, okay, if we can, let's say we can narrow it down to 45 AD. If we can narrow it down to 45 AD, then we say, okay, chronologically, where was Paul? Who were the first persons he saw? What are the possibilities? From that list, who can we eliminate? And then who is a leftover possibility? Let's look at Galatians chapter 2, verse 1. 14 years after I went up to Jerusalem with Barnabas, I went by revelation. I think the word by can be in, with, or by. I went in revelation, with revelation, by revelation. That is, it was revelation that told him to go. This could be the revelation of the mystery. Now, I went up to Jerusalem with Barnabas, I think, and took Titus with me also. I think that probably we would have to have Barnabas and Titus on the list. He goes on, I went by revelation, communicated unto them, that's the people in Judea. They would not have been first. The gospel which I preach among the Gentiles, but privately unto them which are a reputation. Neither Titus, who is with me, being a Greek, was compelled to be circumcised. So Titus has got to know something about this. Now, if we get to, say, Acts chapter 16, then he came to Derbe and Lystra, and behold, a certain disciple named Timotheus was there. So you've got Timothy, who is a Greek, and here Timothy becomes circumcised. And Paul receives this Macedonian call. Who's with him there? I'm not sure that it tells, but verse 5 almost seems like there's a gap of time here. So the churches were established in the faith and increased in number daily. Now, when they had gone throughout Phrygia, that seems to be a gap there. So by the time you get down here into verses 7, 8, 9, the Macedonian call, you're well past the time. And you get into people like Lydia, and then very soon the Philippian jailer. I probably, if I had to be held to it right here and now, then I'd probably be wrong. But I'd probably go with Barnabas, Titus. Timothy's in there fairly soon. Maybe you could argue Timothy even earlier, but probably not. I don't know where Silas comes in there. I don't think we see Silas until later. So, if you have to have an answer, then I'll say Barnabas. But I could be wrong. How's that? That's an interesting question. I should dig into that one further as well. Can we put together a reasoned argument on who came second, who came third, who came along the way? Let's just add who came second. Let's add that to something we ought to look at one of these days. Davey, thank you. Appreciate it. Let's go to Rhonda in Missouri. Good to see you. If we should let Scripture be read in its simplest way, should we assume David's parents went with him to Judah? Since we are told they stayed with Moab while David was in the hold, the very next verse tells us that David left the hold. Simple, no speculation. They just simply were the focus of the story. From this point on, seems more likely. Okay, this question is related to yesterday's sermon as we were talking about David in the cave of Adullam. And that comes from 1 Samuel chapter 22. We gave the Jewish tradition that the king of Moab killed Jesse there. We know that we don't see him anymore. But if we get, so his father's house heard of it, they went down thither. This is the cave of Adullam. And he, in verse 3, he went to Moab. He said unto the king of Moab, let my father and my mother pray thee come forth and be with you till I know what God will do for me. Now, that little phrase right there, let's go ahead and highlight it because we might want to come back to it later. He brought them, the parents, before the king of Moab. They dwelt with him all the while that David was in the hold. Now, I guess it's this phrase right here that is, again, the key, all the while that David was in the hold. And the prophet Gad said to David, abide not, depart, get thee into the land of Judah. David departed and came to the forest of Hereth. So, yeah, you could build this. Now, you say it's simple and no speculation. There's a little bit of speculation involved in there, because I'm sure we could find examples for this even in the scripture. I'm trying to think of an example. I did this until such and such. No, let me say that different. It's not really until. How about this? All through the Reagan years, where was that? There we go. All through the Reagan years, I had hair. Now, you could speculate that in the Bush years I did not have hair. Would not be a good assumption. So you come back over here, all the while that David was within the hold, his parents were with the king of Moab. Doesn't really tell us what about when he was out of the hold, what happens there. Then if I wanted to argue they didn't go with him, I would use the first highlighted phrase, till I know what God will do for me. When David moves back into Judah, I'm not sure he knew exactly what God will do for me, how God is going to carry this out. So I might argue that they stayed longer than that. Now, I do believe, okay, they were the focus of the story right there, and then they're not the focus of the story later, so we just are not given the answer. But I'm not sure completely that the simplest way there is to assume that they went out with him into Judah, although it certainly is a possibility, and probably, I don't know, probably a possibility that's more accepted than the hey, we got killed possibility. Okay. I see a question from Nicholas, but I think, I was going back to my text messages here, I think we had a mistake on that, so I'm going to skip that one just in case we don't have that quite right. Let's go down to Keith the Mosquito Man. Good to see you. The gospel in Mark 13:10. This is not the same gospel that we preach today, correct? I'm going to stop right there for a moment, and I'm going to say, yes, that is correct. We know this for two reasons. One, Paul said he received the gospel in Ephesians chapter 3 and that it was not known prior to that time. Two, Paul says in Romans 15:8 that Jesus was a minister of the circumcision, confirming the promises to the fathers. So we have a different gospel here. Now, Let's look at Mark 13:10. That is just the, I sometimes call them the curbs, you know. We set these boundaries that say, okay, Paul's gospel started here, therefore his gospel can't be over here. And that enables us to kind of quickly answer a question just based upon some broad parameters. But now let's come in to the specifics and see Mark 13:10. Jesus says this gospel must first be published among all nations. Now, and the gospel, he says, must first be published among all nations. Now, of course, most would take that to be the gospel of grace that you and I preach today. And it must be preached to all nations. This, by the way, there was a guy named Jerry Rankin. Jerry Rankin used to be the president of what then was called the Foreign Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention. Today it's called the International Mission Board. It might have changed during that. He was a nice guy. I knew him. I corresponded with him. He had a lifelong missionary career. He was a scholar and a gentleman. He was not a right divider. And he was passionate about missions. And Jerry Rankin took this verse right here, the gospel must first be published among all nations. And during the 80s, 90s, when he was president of the Foreign Mission Board, he really, I'll put this in the most negative way you can put it. He said, this is the generation. And there were a lot of people saying that. No, not Chuck Colson. Who's the guy that started Campus Crusade? Bill Bright was saying that. That this is the generation. A lot of people in the 80s and 90s, this is the generation. So Jerry Rankin really pushed the envelope to get as many missionaries out there as you can. This is the last generation. We've got to get them out there to the ends of the earth. And the number of missionaries skyrocketed and was, well, by the way, years later, came into some financial problems and had to trim back, I don't know, maybe as many as half of those missionaries, ultimately they'll account by attrition and early retirement plans and all that kind of stuff that corporations do. Now, he was going on this concept. The gospel must first be preached among all nations. I just found this document last week. I can't remember. I think I did bring it up. Lewis Sperry Chafer, who was the founder of Dallas Theological Seminary. This is in, what is this? His book called Dispensationalism, which was published by Dallas Seminary Press in 1951, but he was dead by 51, I think. And so I could be wrong, but I think this is a reprint of some things that he had previously written. And the reason I wanted to clip this is because most DTS guys today, if I wrote this, they would say that is heresy, blasphemy. Nobody should say that and be allowed to have their name ever mentioned again. But Lewis Sperry Chafer says here that the gospel of the kingdom and the gospel of the grace of God, you got to recognize a difference. And he goes through and he talks about the difference and brings this up. Now, one of the reasons I bring this, I haven't read the full rest of the question, but I see my pastor this past Sunday preached. If you talk to your pastor about this, let me get you the Lewis Sperry Chafer article and use that. Don't mention Randy White. Because if they go, Randy White's a crazed lunatic out in Taos, New Mexico. He teaches there's two gospels. He wrote a book about it right there, the rightly divided gospel. Oh my goodness, heresy, Galatians, let him be accursed. But if you show him Lewis Sperry Chafer, founder of Dallas Theological Seminary, oh, well, then he's got to deal with it. So forget Randy White and show him Chafer. Now, your first question, The gospel in Mark 13:10, this is not the same gospel we preach today, correct? Absolutely correct. It's the kingdom gospel that will be proclaimed to all the nations. And by the way, thank you, Rudy. Matthew 24:14 specifies the gospel of the kingdom. And so the first thing that you would have to do is separate the gospel of the kingdom from the gospel of grace. Then you could even look and say, has the gospel of the kingdom been proclaimed to all nations? No, not at all. I would say even the United States does not know about the gospel of the kingdom. I would say there is no country in the Western Hemisphere that knows about the gospel of the kingdom. As strange as that sounds. If I were to write a 10-question quiz about the gospel of the kingdom, the physical gospel of the kingdom, that's this one right here. The kingdom of God is the prophesied reign of God through the Messiah, a descendant of King David who liberates Israel from its oppressors, establishes a just and righteous rule. This kingdom is a geopolitical reality centered in Jerusalem that restores Israel to its former glory and brings peace, justice, and prosperity to the world. They would fail it. We would have a hard time finding 10 seminary students who would pass the quiz, the 10-question basic quiz. They don't know the gospel of the kingdom. They couldn't tell you what Louis Sperry Chafer, why he defined the differences, that Bullinger, why he defined the differences. He mentioned Schofield, why Schofield defined the differences. The gospel of the kingdom hasn't even made it to the seminaries yet. So, now going on, my pastor this past Sunday preached a sermon using Mark 13:10 as a way to tell the congregation to get the word out because, as he put it, we're in the last days of the church. Yeah, this is, remember my book, Evangelical Garbage, the subtitle is How Evangelicalism is Confused, Manipulative, and Downright Dangerous. This is the manipulative portion of that. And I suspect, I don't know Mosquito Man's pastor, but I suspect he's a nice guy. I suspect he means well. He might even wear a tie. He's not setting out to manipulate people. He's not setting out to use people, but it's all he knows. He's been brainwashed. Probably went to the big box seminary. Got his degree on the wall. And so wouldn't even have the beginning of a clue on how to talk about the gospel of the kingdom is the difference. If you presented the idea to him, he would be opposed to it right away. So much that he could not even question the assumptions. There is a way to deal with that. We'll talk about that here in a moment. So your pastor was being manipulative, using that to get people to go on the mission field, to give money, to be more involved in the local community. Here is this urgency. It's the same thing Jerry Rankin did in the 1980s, and the same mistake that he did. So, a lot in your congregation, of course, will say, "Oh yeah, we should give more to the missions fund. We should give, maybe think about going on missions. Let's do a mission trip. Let's have a spaghetti dinner so we can pay for the youth to go down to Guadalajara and hand out water bottles, whatever. We got to do this. Urgency." At least, can I diverge a moment? During the Churchill years, and by that I include all the way pre-World War I up through World War II, because he was Lord of the Admiralty and things like this early on, Churchill loved, what do you call it, counterfeit operations. Trick people. It was almost you could say it's Churchillian to manipulate the masses with bad information placed strategically. Churchill was the expert in the 20th century on doing that. So many stories of Churchill fooling the world on purpose. Now, I look at that and I say, good job, Churchill. You were doing your job. Because your job as Lord of the Admiralty, and then your job as leader of your country, was to win the war. And you did that. But it's a totally different thing if you are manipulating the information for manipulation's sake, or for your own, advancement or whatever it may be. Now, again, I think the guys on the bottom rung, I don't know if I like to say that because I'm a guy on the bottom rung. I always have been. The pastors out there, they're not the seminary president. They're not the seminary professors even. They're not they communicate on the local level. They are not manipulators, but they are manipulating because they've been manipulated. So you want to change one of these guys. So your pastor comes, he preaches this sermon. A lot of people, give to the mission fund. And you want to say, Pastor, a little manipulation going on. Here's what I would do. Now, this might be a little Churchillian. You can decide if you're comfortable. I think I would maybe get this article. Again, it comes from Dispensationalism, Dallas Seminary Press, 1951, pages 83 through 85. Or, ask me for it, just delete the email address. Maybe even get Dr. Alice's Evangelical Quarterly, Edinburgh, volume 8, number 1, page 29, if you can get a copy of that. Sometimes say, Pastor, I've been looking at this stuff here. Get a little Schofield in there. I wouldn't use Bullinger because Bullinger's like white. Some baggage there. Lay out this. There's a group of people out there who have been saying, and these are pretty distinguished guys, Schofield, Schaeffer, well respected. They've been saying that the gospel of the kingdom is different than the gospel of grace. I've been reading on this a little bit, Pastor. I don't know. I just want to hand that information off to you. If you got to give your pastor some room, because he's been brainwashed and he doesn't know he's been brainwashed. So you got to plant these little seeds in there. Maybe a couple weeks later, hey, Pastor, what'd you think of that article? That's just going through my mind. And work through that. Is the church in the last days? Maybe so, maybe not. Can you build it off Mark 13:10? No. I'm convinced nobody knows if we're in the last days or not. I'm convinced that the rapture will come. I'll put it at the farthest end. The rapture will come when humanity, either because of their, probably even, I'll say because of their physical transformation, they're no longer fully human anymore. They said the other day, I read an article about it anyway, in some science magazine, mRNA changes DNA. It doesn't just give a message to the DNA, it changes DNA. So we're not far from humanity no longer being humanity as God created it. I would say when we get to that point, it's the last days of the church. But could I say that today? This is the last days of the church? No, because politically things could change, sociologically things could change. Our society, it'll turn on a dime. It could go back into what would look like a great revival today and become, 1950s all over again. There is the possibility of that happening. So are we in the last days? I don't know. I'll tell you later. It's like I talked about Friday on prognosticating about American politics. Like, good luck, because that river changes quick. Quick, quick, quick. Okay, so I did not get through all the questions here. Let's see what I have missed as I clean out my box here. In the morning, I'm going to start with Sylvia in Indiana, and we're going to go down to Manny in San Antonio, and then we're going to go up to Calgary and see Josh and take care of his question. And then let's see here. Then I have a follow-up from Rhonda's question about the parents. David's parents. Let's just. I'm reading the question now. Let's just do that. That previous question. This isn't the message from the prophet. Oh no. Then I'm sorry. Then isn't the message from the prophet about the direction, about what God will do for me. Let's just jump back to Rhonda's question there for just a moment, because that was 1 Samuel chapter 22. Let's start in verse 3, where we had, let my father and my mother come forth. He brought till I know what God will do. He brought them, and the prophet Gad said, "Abide not in the hold. Depart, get thee into the land of Judah." David departed. So Rhonda says, isn't the message from the prophet the direction about what God will do with me? Yeah, I at least you could certainly adopt that argument and really make a pretty convincing argument. It would not be a weak argument. You would have some degree of robustness to say, verse 5 right here, Gad said, the prophet Gad said unto David. This is, let's highlight here some different ones. What God will do for me. Now, if you interpret this as what God will do for me while I'm down in this hold, well, abide not in the hold. It would make sense to tie all those together. Abide not in the hold, depart, get thee to the land of Judah. That's what God will do for you. So go get your parents, get out of the hold, and go. By the way, I didn't mention this in the sermon yesterday, but some take the hold not to be the cave of Adullam, but rather some stronghold in Moab. That, he made an agreement with the king of Moab. I'll stay over here in this stronghold. So could have already been in Moab still. Rhonda goes on to say, isn't that how the life is lived for David? He was never 5 the entire message. I'm not sure. Something didn't click through all the way. He received every step in its time. That's a good point. David rarely got, here's what's going to happen 20 steps from now. It is, you got to make a decision right now. So he was given the message what to do right then. I think you can build the argument. And The only way to know if that's better than the rabbinical argument is to dig up the rabbinical argument and see where they get it. I didn't do that to see what kind of support they have from their argument. Did they just totally speculate, or do they have some degree? I do know that later on there is a passage about chapter 26, I think it is, where David thanks the king of Ammon for the kindness that he had done, and that the rabbis tie that into this, that the king of Ammon kind of came to the rescue there and helped out at least his brother. But is there more than that? That's still pretty much speculation. What have you got there? So I think what you have done is say, yeah, here is an interpretation which likely fits hermeneutical principles better than the rabbinical approach. And then you've got a pretty decent argument there. Again, is it one that's solved, signed, sealed, and delivered? That's it? Probably not. But is it as close as you can get? Maybe so. So Rhonda says, thanks for helping me read with new understanding from a dispensational perspective. It's been refreshing for me. I've always questioned the evangelical garbage. Good for you. I felt I was always on the wrong side of acceptable teachings because I just didn't agree. You know, that's the story of so many here. And I think even a lot of people in evangelical churches today, they question it. They don't go for it. But, man, you bring it up and they attack you, sometimes directly, sometimes more subtly. You know, you got to be last in the potluck supper line because you ask questions. A lot of evangelical churches ought to have a sign out there: "Thou shalt not ask questions," 11th commandment, because they really don't don't allow that. Well, glad to, I get caught up in the chats there. It's hard to talk and read the chats at the same time. Thanks for being here with us. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Tomorrow, once again, we are going to begin with Sylvia in Indiana, and then Manny and Josh, and look forward to that tomorrow. Good to see each one of you, whether you're from Colorado or Ontario or Dominican Republic or Oklahoma or West Virginia. Hey, John, I learned the other day why West Virginia is West Virginia and never came back to be Virginia. I didn't know the history of West Virginia, but now I do. As long as we don't go over 2 minutes, I can give you that. Yeah, excellent to see all of you, all through. Okay, got to stop. Thanks for being here with us today. It's a blessing to have you, and thanks for Nathan on the controls, and all of you who are watching over and providing for our ministry.